Hello.
Okay. به نام خدا و به نام زن زندگی آزادی, in the name of God, in the name of woman, life, and freedom. These are going to be a series of short podcasts that Kayvon and I will be doing, hopefully on a daily basis, if not on a daily basis, but definitely on a weekly basis, where we will give you assessments of the ongoing progress of the people's uprising and revolution in Iran against the theocracy. Kayvon, how are you doing?
Thank you. Thank you, Wade. I'm fine. How are you?
Very, very good. I understand you were at the Berlin protest yesterday.
Yes, I was in Berlin protest. So to give the audience, a general insight about what's going on in Iran, I should say that nationwide protests have been taking place across Iran since September 16th.
Yes.
When Mahsa Amini died after her arrest by the Islamic Republic's morality police in Tehran, 2 days earlier, actually, for what they described as her inappropriate hijab, right?
Yep.
The 22-year-old Kurdish woman had been on vacation in the capital with her brother when she was detained. 2 hours later, the Islamic Republic police reported to her family that Mahsa had been hospitalized after experiencing, a stroke and heart attack, and that she had gone into a coma. Although authorities did not allow her parents to see the medical reports, a hacker group revealed pictures of her skull, which were subsequently confirmed as authentic by official media, showing that the right side of her, had been fractured as a result of a direct strike.
Let's do this. Let's hold on a second, Kayvon. Let's do this. This is the evidence that point by point. Here's what happens. Mahsa Amini had come to Tehran to visit her brother on the 13th of September 2022 and was arrested by the Gasht Ershad, which should be translated more accurately as the Guidance Patrol, at the entry of the Shahid Haqqani Expressway in Tehran while in the company of her family. She was then transferred to the custody of the Moral Security. This has been reported by, let's give the sources here. This was reported by the Neue Yorkshire Zeitung in German. This was reported by the Associated Press. This was reported by swissinfo.ch. This was reported by alarabia.co.uk. According to Amini's cousin, she was tortured and insulted in the van, as witnessed by her co-detainees. After she arrived at the police station, she began to lose vision and fainted. It took 30 minutes for the ambulance to arrive and an hour and a half to get her to the Castro Hospital. This was reported by Sky News. For 2 days, Amini was in a coma in Castro Hospital in Tehran, reported by Iran True, which is a portal based out of Iran itself. On September 16, journalist Nilufar Hamedi, later arrested as well, broke the story of her coma, posting to Twitter a photo of Amini's father and grandmother crying and embracing in the hospital hallway. This was reported by CNN. Amini died in an intensive care unit later that day. This has been reported by the Kurdistan Human Rights Network, reported by Al Arabiya, and reported also by The Telegraph. The evidence and the testimony. According to the BBC, eyewitnesses said Amini was beaten by police while in the police van shortly after arrest. By September 17th, Iranian police were denying the allegations of beating and were claiming she had suffered, quote unquote, a sudden heart failure, reported by the BBC also. The clinic where Amini was arrested, was treated, released a statement on Instagram saying that she had already been brain dead when she had been admitted around the 13th of September. By 19th of September, the post had been deleted from Instagram. This has been reported by the Deutsche Welle and an assortment of European-based news outlets. Also reported by Al Arabiya. On September 17th, the police chief of Tehran stated that the grounds of Amini's arrest had been for wearing her headscarf improperly and for wearing tight pants. This is reported by Al Jazeera.com. By 19th of September, police had released CCTV footage showing a woman who they identified as Amini talking with an official who grabs Amini's clothing. Amini holds her head with her hands and collapses. Amini's father dismissed the footage as a quote-unquote edited and doctored version of events. This has been reported by the BBC and an assortment of other European and North American-based outlets. Amini's brother noticed bruises on his sister's heads and legs. The women who were detained along with Amini said she had been severely beaten for resisting the insults and curses of the officers who had arrested her. This has been reported by Roda Media Network. It has been reported by BBC, Iran International, the Associated Press, Reuters, and a whole assortment of other European and North America-based outlets in English. Published hospital pictures show Mahsa Amini bleeding from the ear and sporting bruises under her eyes. In an 18th of September letter, Dr. Hossein Karampur, the top medical official in Hormozgan province, pointed out that such symptoms, quote unquote, do not match the reasons given by some authorities who declared the cause to be a heart attack. They are instead consistent with a head injury and the resulting bleeding, unquote. This is reported by Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and a whole assortment of other European-based networks, including Al Jazeera, whatnot. Let me continue. This was also confirmed by alleged medical scans of her skull leaked by activists showing bone fracture, hemorrhage, and brain edema, reported by Al Arabiya, also reported by Iran International. According to Iran International, the Iranian government was forging fake medical records for Amini, showing that she had a history of heart disease. On the 20th of September, Dr. Masoud Shirvani, a neurosurgeon, stated on state-owned television that Amini had a brain tumor that was extracted at the age of 8. This has been reported by a whole assortment of IRI news portals. By 21st of September, the hospital had released preliminary CT scans. Government supporters stated that the CT scans showed psychological stress caused by a previous brain operation. Critics stated the scans showed physical beating and trauma. The Iranian government stated Amini had a brain operation at the age of 5, reported by The Guardian and reported also by Iranian news portals. Regarding various government claims, Mahsa Amini's father, Amjad Amini, told the BBC on the 22nd of September that, quote, they are lying. She had never had any medical conditions. She had never had a surgery, unquote. 2 classmates interviewed by the BBC said that they weren't aware of Mahsa ever being in the hospital. Amjad said he had not been allowed to view his daughter's autopsy report. He denied that Mahsa had been in bad health. He, quote, I asked them to show me the body cameras of the security officers. They told me the cameras were out of battery, unquote. Iranian authorities had charged that Mahsa was wearing immodest clothes when arrested. Amjad rejected the claim, stating that she always wore a long overcoat. Amjad said he was repeatedly prevented by medical staff from seeing his daughter's body after her death. Quote, I wanted to see my daughter, but they wouldn't let me in, unquote. And charged that when he asked to see the autopsy report, he was told by the doctor instead, quote, I will write whatever I want and has nothing to do with you, unquote. Amjad saw the body after it had been wrapped for funeral and noticed bruises on her feet, but could not see the rest of the beauty due to the wrapping. Iranian authorities denied any head injuries or internal injuries. This has been reported by the BBC, Iran International, Al Jazeera, and a whole plethora of European-based and North American-based news outlets. According to Iran International, on 29th of September, an audio file was released by a former commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, the Sepah, which reports unnamed, quote-unquote, reliable sources saying the reason for Mahsa Amini's death was an injury to her skull and that the injury was the result of a severe beating. These are from sources from within the Sepah Pastor and the IRGC itself. This has been reported by Iran International. It has been reported by Iran Wire. It has been reported by Al Arabiya, and it has also been reported by a whole other plethora of European news outlets. The Amini's family lawyer, Saleh Nikbakht, told the Etemad online news website that quote-unquote respectable doctors believe Mahsa was hit and beaten in custody. This has been reported by The Guardian. Neek Bakht also said the family wants a fact-finding committee to probe her death and that police footage filmed after her arrest should be handed over, unquote, reported by Iran front page. By 2nd of October, Amini's family had acknowledged that Amini had an operation for a minor neurological condition, possibly bronchial, at the age of 8, but said it had been under control through levothyroxine medication to treat hypothyroidism, and that her doctors had recently given her the all clear. Citing medical specialists they had consulted, the family stated the condition was unrelated to Amini's death. Reported by The Guardian, reported by Iran Wire, reported by La Prensa Latina Media. Now, this last tidbit has once again been denied by the family, saying that these statements were not made by them. At 7th of October, coroner's report stated that Amini's death was, quote unquote, not caused by blows to the head and limbs, unquote, instead linked her death to pre-existing medical condition, ruling that she had died from multiple organ failure caused by cerebral hypoxia. The report stated that Amini had a brain tumor operated when she was 8. The report did not say whether Amini has suffered any injuries. These are coming from the government, reported by the Islamic Republic news portals, etc. In a 13th of October letter, over 800 members, this is the last item we should read, in a 13th of October letter, over 800 members of Iran's medical council accused the head of Iran's medical council of assisting in a government cover-up of the cause of Mahsa Amini's death. This is reported by Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and a whole plethora of other news outlets. We should add that apparently 100 members of this Iranian Medical Council have subsequently been arrested for a petition that they sent to the government regarding their protest against the government attempted cover-up over the death of Mahsa Amini. I cite this information because of its importance, given the fact that currently online in social media, there are a whole plethora of English language propagandists claiming that there is no evidence for foul play on the part of the Gashti Ershad, the morality police or guidance patrol. They are verbatim repeating the propaganda talking points of the regime, trying to craft a narrative that all of these protests in Iran have been manufactured from outside of Iran, not mentioning the fact that there were actually ongoing protests since last year over water shortages, over the hike in over the high cost of living in Iran, etc., and that in many ways the current protests presently are a continuation of the protests that occurred as of 2019 when the regime murdered 1,500 individuals. This was when the government of Rouhani overnight hiked the price of petrol in Iran over 350%. I'll hand it back to you. I'm sorry for the long reading, Kevin, but I'll hand it over to you.
It was such a thorough and impeccable, timeline that you provided. Thanks. And so it's safe to say, Wahid, that the regime was attempting to shape its own narrative, right?
Yes, from the beginning.
The regime's refusal, to respond to the family's questions about what happened to Mahsa is far from the first time.
No, exactly.
The Iranian authorities have let an unjustifiable death go unanswered.
Yes.
Actually, her death brings to mind Ukraine international flight 75Q, shot down by an IRGC direct missile in January 2020, where all 176 passengers on board were killed. The Amini's families laid resistance to a government order to bury Mahsa immediately at night and not to follow up on the case is perhaps the main reason that Amini's death has become a symbol for Iranian protests today. Her father has instead spoken publicly about his daughter's death and asked for people to support all women throughout Iran.
Yes.
Not just his daughter.
Yes.
Others quickly joined Amini's father's call. In Amini's hometown, Sarandaj, during her burial, women removed their scarves
Yes.
and chanted together with men, women, life, liberty, Zan, Zendegi, Azadi,
Or
or
Jen
Jen,
Jian
Jen
Azadi in Kurdish.
in Kurdish,
Yeah.
right? These demonstrations marked the beginning of the current protest movement, with the movement soon spreading rapidly throughout the country. In the past, right, mass protests in Iran have typically been more centralized, to the capital city of Tehran.
Yes.
In contrast, these protests started in a, kind of peripheral area, in a Kurdish region in western Iran where Amini was from originally. This region is familiar, with repression. The regime has scrutinized, the region since, the court first uprising against Islamic Republic rule
Yes.
in 1979, right?
Yeah.
However, this tactic is reflected in Iran's immediate response to protest against Amini's death, when state media, Mashreq News or Tasnim News and their affiliated agents and social media attempted to label the movement as a separatist anti-Iranian campaign led by Kurdish group. Or,
Yes.
As you know, of course, this narrative completely ignores the fact that protesters in Tehran and other cities like Mashhad, Shiraz, Kerman, Tabriz are from all different ethnic and religious backgrounds.
Yes.
And still supports the protest against the Tehran regime, and notably, this divisive rhetoric has done very little, to curb protesters across the country, right? Moreover, these protesters,
you don't have to you don't have to go that far. Mahsa's, death is one thing. How do they explain the deaths of other protesters? Nika Shakarami, killed on the 20th of September.
He was bludgeoned to death, yes.
Killed on the 20th of September. Hadis Najafi, killed on the 21st of September. Sarina Esmailzadeh, killed on the 23rd of September. See, that the regime can spin all the narratives that it likes around Mahsa Amini, but they are incapable of then maintaining their narratives in the face of all these number of other killings of Iranian women that has occurred since the 13th and 16th of September. Not to mention the fact that Kurdistan and also Zahedan in the south of Iran both have been exploded in an insurrection against the regime. In Zahedan province itself, security forces, according to Molavi Abdul Hamid, who is the Imam Jomeh, the chief cleric of Zahedan, killed over 20 to 28 people point blank range who were coming out of the Friday gathering, the Friday prayers. This happened in early October, where the security forces fired point blank range at these people in Zahedan. Same in the city of Sanandaj in Kurdistan, where there has been a bloodbath. Now, the regime claims that these are acts by separatists, and these are what it terms ikhtishashgaran, which a translation would be rioters or anarchists. It would be another translation of ikhtishashgaran for ikhtishash. The fact of the matter is that there are 180 Iranian cities, towns and cities throughout Iran who have witnessed these protests, who have heard the chants of Zan Zindagi Azadi, woman life freedom, and Mahsa Amini for the last month and now 5 days. So the regime is very fast falling short of trying to maintain its narratives, its victim narratives that it has usually churned up for these last 43 years around the things that it's doing. But we need to set the record straight, not just for the sake of what the regime is saying, but the fact is that there are agents of the regime, English language people who have PhDs, who are coming out of universities like Columbia University and are currently hired by institutions such as Stanford universities, who are going online on these social media portals that are controlled by what I have called the Kremlin alt media ecology, who are Assadists, who are Putinists, who are Duginists, who are far righters, who are people who supported Trump while claiming to be leftists back in 2016. And these people are uncritically whitewashing on behalf of the regime of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And as of right this moment, I think many Iranians see these individuals as also basically an extension of the regime in the West itself. So we put these narratives out there. These people can claim all of the narratives of regime change by the West that they like. They cannot explain the fact that 180 cities throughout Iran have erupted in a uprising, in a national revolution against the theocracy, that they have proven that this theocracy or this Khomeiniist theocracy does not have the will of the Iranian people behind it any longer, even if it did, even if these people want to argue that the 1979 revolution was a popular revolution, they can no longer argue that this. And based on the Ayatollah Khomeini's own assertions made at Behesht Zahra on the 2nd of February 1979, when he said that even that one generation cannot decide the fate and destiny of another generation, on the very principle of what Mr. Ayatollah Khomeini uttered in Behesht Zahra, these uprising and this national Iranian revolution has legitimacy, and the Islamic Republic of Iran, the regime, has no legitimacy whatsoever, and they cannot remotely answer this fact. Instead, these people have to rely on these manufactured victim narratives, these very hollow, weaponized anti-imperialist and anti-colonialist talking points in order to justify themselves. And it is the revolution is also an information revolution and a psychological war against the minions of the regime itself. And we should probably leave it there, Kevin. Otherwise, this is going to go on forever.
Oh yes, right. Given that, I must say that meanwhile, another incident actually fueled the rage when, as you noticed, while regime was trying to maintain, that hijab wearing is completely voluntarily, right?
Yes. In
his interview with CBS News, the current Iranian president, Ebrahim Raisi, made a very astonishing comment to the effect that, yes, hijab is a spontaneous and completely voluntarily, a cultural behavior, blah, blah, blah. However, he made another claim, while simultaneously requiring, his own female interviewer from CBS to wear a hijab during the interview.
You're talking about Christiane Amanpour, yeah.
No. I'm talking about Leslie Stahl. Christiane Amanpour, yes, as you said, during actually Raisi's visit to New York to attend the UN General Assembly, he canceled the planned interview with Christiane Amanpour, of CNN, after she rejected his demand to wear a headscarf during the meeting. So my question is, while the attack against, Mahsa Amini and her family served as their impetus, it is important to note that the current demonstrations in Iran are apparently going beyond, protest against the compulsory hijab,
yes,
and the morality police as well. How do you place, morality police or obligatory hijab and the way they play their role to spark, the crisis or the protest?
This is a very interesting discussion. Number one, Iran's, under the law in Iran, hijab is compulsory, and this comes out of the abolition of the Family Protection Act of 1975 in 1979, after the mullahs came to power, where they abolished the laws that the Iranian Majlis in 1975, this was obviously under the Shah's Majlis, had passed, granting women full equality under the law, equality of dress, etc., equality of marriage and divorce, etc. So once this was abolished in 1979, the first thing that the regime did almost immediately after it came to power, actually within 30 days after Khomeini came back to Iran, was to start pushing for mandatory veiling and mandatory hijab of women. And between the 8th of March and the 14th of March, 1979, to commemorate the International Women's Day, but there was a series of protests and marches by Iranian women, participated from between 15 to 20,000 women in the streets of Tehran, protesting the attempted veiling of women in Iran. And there were counter demonstrations by the supporters of Ayatollah Khomeini, who apparently had even thrown acid in the faces of several of the women who were participating in these protests against mandatory veiling. This was before the Constituent Assembly. This was before the referendum of that year, which occurred on the 1st of April. This was before Khomeini had even fully been able to consolidate his power. But immediately after coming to Iran, this issue of mandatory veiling had become the linchpin of the new regime that took power by force. Now, the issue of mandatory veiling is not just symbolic, but it goes to the very fact that the regime of the Islamic Republic of Iran, since 1979, has been systematically practicing in law and in fact a system of gender apartheid. So when the hijab and the taking off of the veil of the hijab becomes the symbol of resistance against this regime, it becomes a symbol of resistance against the fundamental basis of the gender apartheid system of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And that the mullah's interpretation of the Sharia, that these Hozavi, Isna Ashari mujtahids, that the people of Iran are rejecting their interpretation, any similar interpretations of scripture. There have been a litany of Western and Eastern feminist writers who have historically unpacked the issue of the hijab historically and found that there is actually very little historicity, even from early Islam, in the mandatory veiling of women. But these regimes and these readings of the Sharia by these mujtahids, these patriarchal systems, has been the fist by which they have kept the women down. So basically, when the hijab is taken off, when the protest becomes around the hijab, it becomes a protest against the very patriarchal, the uber patriarchal nature of this system, right? And once that happens, even though I do not like Masih Alinejad, I don't particularly think this woman's politics is all that great, since she likes the kinds of Pompeo, etc. But she does have a point, and she is correct when she says that once the issue of the hijab, when the women of Iran defy the issue of hijab, this is like the fall of the Berlin Wall. This is like the fall of the Berlin Wall, because once the issue of women's rights and the mandatory, the forced veiling of women is directly challenged, right? Then the very raison d'etre and legitimacy of the Islamic Republic of Iran will come crash tumbling down. Kevin, we only have 10 minutes left on this, so
yes, okay. And most importantly, the other day you brought in a very valid point. You said that residents in cities like Qom or Mashhad,
yes,
which have long been considered backbones of the Iranian regime's ideology and
yes,
support, are also protesting against, the regime, much like their fellow citizens. However, my last question: for the first time, right, it seems as though Iranians from all different regions and ideologies, are uniting against the regime.
Yes, they are. Yeah, they are.
Can you reflect on it a little bit?
Absolutely. Left, right, monarchist, MEK, socialist, communist, nationalist, everybody who has been in one way or another disenfranchised from the current system, even people who were formerly supporters of the regime, whether 43 years ago or even more recently, have basically abandoned it. And we should remind the people that the regime in Iran, and systematically for the last 43 years, has been nothing but a kleptocracy, a mafia state. It is not a revolutionary state trying to establish equality and egalitarianism, etc. It is a kleptocracy, a mafia state, where certain people have concentrated power and monopoly of wealth in their own hands to the detriment of others. They have erected various industries that they profit from. One of these, in my opinion, is the Palestine industry, that these people are milking both the Iranian people as well as the Palestinians simultaneously. This whole axis of resistance stuff has proven itself over time to be complete nonsense, that the Hezbollah and the government of Assad and the Islamic Republic, and to some degree even the Houthis of Yemen, are basically profiting off a racket, which is led by the Islamic Republic of Iran and by the office of Khamenei and the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guards. So people have to bear in mind that this is a mafia state. We're fighting a mafia state. The dictatorship behind the Islamic Republic is a mafia dictatorship. This is a kleptocracy, a corrupt business, as it were, under the garb of religion. You know, I've made lots of criticism about the Baha'is in the past, but the mullahs are a complete, demonstration of what a kind of society, a kind of the sort of theocracy, that the Baha'is wish to establish would look like in an Islamist guise. And this is the Islamic Republic of Iran. These two are no different. So we want after 100 some years since the constitutional revolution, we want to bring the constitutional revolution to port. The constitutional revolution cut the power of the royals and the shahs of Iran, but it's one of its fundamental goals was to cut the power of the clergy in Iran. And for those apologists and hacks, mouthpieces of the Islamic Republic, who want to claim that the mullahs have an indigenous root in Iranian society, I would remind them that in fact that the 12-verse Shia mullahs were imported to Iran from Lebanon and Iraq during the beginning of the reign of the Safavids at the beginning of the 16th century. Furthermore, for over almost a 60-year period, they were kicked out of Iran by Nadir Shah after the fall of the Safavids in the 18th century. This policy was kept intact by the Zands, and it was only because Agha Muhammad Khan of Gozaar, the founder of the Gozaar dynasty, needed political allies, did he invite these people to come back to Iran. And immediately when they set foot back in Iran in the 1890s, they began a massive pogrom and genocide of the Sufis of Iran. And this has been the situation since that time, where these people have only been able to countenance their own power and nobody else's power. And with the rise of Ayatollah Khomeini and the fake revolution of 1979, this issue came to a boiling point, and now the Iranian people are taking matters into their own hands, and we will overthrow this regime, come one way or another.
True. And you think with the Iranian people unprecedentedly, unified and clear in their demands, is international support for the protests increasing?
International support is increasing, and now, especially given the fact that it was found out that the IRI has been sending arms and also personnel to Russians in Crimea and in the Ukraine to fight against the Ukrainian people. So this is now it has an international scope, whereas the United States and other governments were reluctant to impose full, to react in full now with what has been revealed, shows that the IRI and Khamenei particularly is involving himself in issues that is none of his business. And so there is no choice by the international community, in my opinion, to step up. Kayvan, we only have about 5 minutes left on this.
Yes. Okay. So thank you a lot. Thanks for your time. We definitely will catch up later. Okay.
Very good.
Thank you.
Ta piruzi.
Bye bye.